I would first of all like to thank, of course, the organizers, Simeon Tsomokos and all his team, for honoring me again with his invitation to this very, very important meeting. And of course, let me say that what I'm going to be telling to you today are personal views. They have nothing to do with the organization I have the honor to represent. But of course, what can one say that can be new or original after what we have heard here today in what concerns the situation on the global scene? I don't think I can come up with anything new or original. So please allow me to give you my version of events on the global scene very, very briefly. I believe, as all the speakers before me, that these, irrespective of power shifts in our multipolar world, the situation on the global scene today is much more confusing and confused than it has been. Gone are the days that were described when we could, let's say, analyze the events on the global scene very easily. We could write and follow them under a world order where the US was playing in a convincing and perhaps even more important, in a convinced way, the role of the only superpower, with other big powers, of course, like China and Russia, or regional ones like Brazil or India, trying to enhance their global importance and their spheres of influence. So while power shifts themselves as such in a multipolar world are not necessarily a negative development, the way these shifts take place and the new balances they create or the old ones they disrupt determines the overall global situation, the so-called world order on which so much has been said and debated about, especially during the last Munich conference. So are we really facing the need for a new world order, as is the case presented by many international relations experts, by academics, and even by politicians, some of them even given a name to the new world order? Observing the confusing situation and the disarray today, one could argue that yes, indeed, a new world order is needed. One that can better manage and deal with the realities and with the risks of today. And we heard so much about the risks because it is obvious that we certainly live in a multipolar world today, but with one where the real only superpower is losing influence or seems to be losing influence, and at the same time it's being challenged by big powers like China, that has been mentioned, or the resurging Russia and other regional powers. Looking closer to home, to Europe, I think that, as it has been said already, this continent was never in a more precarious situation. Just consider the items that have been mentioned before: economic malaise, Euroscepticism, fragmentation, nationalism, Brexit, xenophobia, refugee crisis, far-right political parties on the surge, isolationism, you name it. And this is going to be a very, very important year for Europe, 2017. We have elections in France, we have elections in Germany and in Holland, perhaps even in Italy, all countries, the four cornerstones of the EU as we used to know it, as we know it. The results of these elections will definitely influence developments on our continent. And even if the far-right parties do not gain power actually, they will be influencing the policies of the parties that will come into power. And this could mean even more Euroscepticism. It could even mean more referenda on Euro exits. So this is the reason perhaps that some analysts go as far as to predict that 2017 could bring closer the possible dissolution of the EU, at least as we know it today. Of course, there are other analysts saying that Russia will try to take advantage of all these difficulties, perhaps even foment some of its own in its effort to increase and consolidate its presence, especially on its western flank. And what about the only superpower of yesterday and today, without a question mark, the US? Well, I believe that apart from the unpredictability of the new US president, there is no doubt that the USA looks tired of its role as a superpower. It has overextended itself to wars in the Middle East, which were widely questioned by many Americans. The average US citizen, far away from the intellectuals of New York or of California, wishes today that his administration takes a closer look and repairs things back home. And this was and is a movement, a popular movement in the US, which unexpectedly for many brought President Trump to power, and which the mainstream media failed to detect, study, or report on it. What does President Trump say openly? We fight in places we should not be fighting. And this is, of course, a trend of withdrawal that does not start with President Trump. Obama, for instance, kept the US away from the Syrian quagmire, just giving the opportunity to his critics to say that he allowed Russia to flex its muscles in the Eastern Mediterranean. What does Trump say? Some of his mottos were used. He also says, "Make America great again." But the question, of course, is, can the only superpower become greater by withdrawing from world affairs? I hardly believe so, and I'm happy that Ian Lesser said that he hardly believes so also. But of course we have to see, it's still a very young administration, how the US system and the various decision centers will cope with this unconventional politics of President Trump. It might well be that his eccentricities, this daily White House reality show, and the avalanche of tweets will be restricted to the surface. It will be just a question of language or of behavior without touching upon the real essence of the US foreign policy. So in order to comply with my time, I believe that poor leadership, wrong decisions, declining confidence, and the lack of perceiving the real down-to-earth needs of the average citizen in the so-called Western world, coupled with the growing ambitions and the dynamic ways of promoting them, shown mainly by China and Russia, have brought to the surface this fundamental question about a new world order. We'll have to see. Although we are in the birthplace of Pythia, I can't give the answers here, but I think one thing is sure, that the shifting powers in our multipolar world, at least as they took place until today, have not offered more stability and security. I believe, and there I'm repeating, I think, what has been said before, what is missing in order to achieve such a situation is more pragmatism, realism, and common sense in the world leadership of today. Less flamboyant, less charismatic leaders who always bring chaos and instability with their self-centered obsessions. Paraphrasing another US president, it's the leadership, stupid. Thank you.